Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? You have yourself a good day? It is now Tuesday afternoon, and we're going to have another guest here, and we actually have a special co-host on this one today. We're going to be working with a gentleman named Daniel. Don't know his last name, don't know his face. You can say anonymous, but it's his story that matters, and we're going to be getting right into it with him. And we also have Kevin, also known as Gov Corrupt. He's going to be co-hosting with me today. So between the two of us, we're going to be talking economics, we're going to be talking life story, we're going to be talking the decline of a country, maybe two of them. So yeah, we'll be get into that one very, very soon. I do want to thank everybody for the Twitter action today. I've been doing nothing but going through messages, a lot of DMs coming in recently. There's a lot of notifications, a lot of people tagging this and that. Special thanks to Dr. Peter McCullough for the retweet of the vaccine injury lawsuit. We are definitely taking this one seriously. It's a very important subject matter. I reached out to Dr. McCullough yesterday to let him know about it, see if he can get himself involved. He tweeted this morning, so thank you very much. That got a lot of attention. And I also want to say thank you to the chief nerd. Dude, nerds unite, right? I'm a nerd, buddy. So thank you very much for clipping out that part about Carrie explaining her injury, what she's suffering through, paralyzed eye, Bell's palsy, other issues, and highlighting it. So thank you very much to the chief nerd out there. Appreciate that, bud. Somebody should clip this and give it to him because he really did help us out on some of that exposure. And of course, thank you to Eva Chipawak and Carrie. I'm still thinking about you. That video is horrible, and I'm going to talk to you again soon. So thank you very much for coming on the show. That video is, of course, going pretty viral. There's a lot of people checking that out. So thank you very much to everybody that's on YouTube watching that and Rumble as well. It's a pretty touching conversation. We got to see the actual effects. Thankfully, YouTube didn't take that video down. I thought they might, but they didn't. But they did give us that blue little banner at the bottom that says, hey, this might be a horrible story, but if you want to feel better, come read the official government response and information, because those feel nicer, don't they? But the truth is she's in a lot of pain, and she's got to deal with a lot of things. She needs some reconstructive surgery. She needs some rehab, and she needs some additional help, mental, physical, spiritual. There's going to be a lot of things that this young lady is going to have to be going through. So if you haven't seen that yet, go and check yesterday's video. It's a late night one, so 7 p.m., and it was breaking news where we got to release that information about the vaccine lawsuit against the government of Canada, Alberta Health Services, even the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. So on that note, though, we're going to come back to Canada, but we're also going to go travel into South America. There's a big country down there that has a lot of reserves, that has a lot of wealth, but for some reason not doing so well. Is it just climate? Is it economics? Is it political? Is it something else? Is it all of that? We're going to talk to Daniel today about what he saw and what he's seen here as well. He's kind of ringing the bell. He's the canary in Canada right now because he's going to let us know how some of this looks very similar to him. And some of it feels oddly familiar. And unfortunately, it's going to probably trigger some horrific situations for us if we continue down this road and don't take it serious enough. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and bring in Daniel and Kevin. So you know Kevin on Twitter as Gov Corrupt. He's got all the good tweets out there. And if you don't know who he is, go follow him because not only are you going to have a chuckle, you're going to have a think. He makes it think with a lot of humor. A little dark, but that's the best part of him. And then Daniel, he's going to be anonymous today. So I don't even know if his name's Daniel, but we'll ask and find out. But the important thing here is he's got a story to share with us, so we're going to hear that. So without further ado, hello, Kevin. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, how are you?
Good evening.
Good evening for you, yes, and it's good afternoon for me. And Daniel, are you afternoon or evening right now?
Afternoon.
All right, so you're not in the Eastern time zone?
No, I'm in the Mountain time zone. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Are you close to me?
Well, you're in Alberta, right?
I am. I'm over by Breton.
Yeah. I'm in Calgary, so I'm in Alberta too. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, I'll be in Calgary in a couple of weeks, so I'll be down in Lethbridge for about a week. So maybe grab you a coffee or something when we make it down there.
Sounds good. Yeah. DM me after we can work it out. Sure, of course.
Sure. So first of all, I'm going to ask. Well, I don't know if I need to put you in the middle of the screen, but we'll do that anyways. But I'm going to ask you to kind of maybe not identify yourself, but tell us a bit about who you want to be in this video, but more your background, where you're from, and why you're here today, if you don't mind, Daniel.
Yeah, it's just mine responding to your earlier statement. My real name's actually Daniel, so
Okay.
I'm not faking there. And basically, I am 24 years old. I am a Canadian citizen because I have been living here since 2006, so that's what 17 years now. But
Oh,
I
wow,
am
okay.
originally from Venezuela, which is a country in South America. Um, I came here to Canada because, as you have told already, the situation in my country like really wasn't good.
Mm-hmm.
So I came here. I've been living here for 17 years. Like I said, I already became a Canadian citizen. I've lived here more time than I did in Venezuela, actually. But beginning, I'd say probably maybe 5 years ago or so, just before COVID, during the government of Justin Trudeau, I began to see, because one thing you need to be clear on this, it's that even though I left Venezuela and I have lived here longer than I have there, I never completely disconnected from my country. So even though I'm living
Right.
here in Canada, I still stayed on top of news. I followed current affairs, day-to-day events. So even though I haven't lived there in over 17 years, I still have a pretty good idea of what is going on, and I can identify trends, and I can see things. I can talk to you in depth about Venezuelan politics because, like I said, I never completely left. Like I've always been connected. You know, I'm far, but I'm not absent. Knowing what happened in Venezuela, keeping all the details in mind, beginning about 5 years ago with the current government of the Liberal Party under Justin Trudeau, I began to see several parallels, several
Well, if you
things
don't
that,
mind, Daniel, I'm going
yeah,
to kind of take you back a little bit further because you're almost into hour two of this show, which
yeah,
is the comparing scene of the video of the
uh-huh,
countries. But you've been here for 17 years, so you were
yes,
born in
yes,
Venezuela.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
how far back do you remember life before it started to get bad? Do you remember life when it was decent?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because I'm not, as you know, Venezuela currently has like a very large refugee crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of it's the largest refugee crisis in the world. Because when people think of refugee crisis, they think of like Northern Africa or Syria or Afghanistan or something. But no, the largest refugee crisis in the world by total number of like volume, it's actually Venezuela, because like all the countries in South America and Latin America surrounding the country have just been completely like flooded with people fleeing the country, right? But that happened. That is fairly recently. That started about 2015, 2016. So what, like 7, 8 years ago? I left in 2006, so I left a full decade before the mass exodus of my countrymen started. And when I left, it wasn't as terrible as it is now. Like you could definitely
Right.
see things coming down the pipe, like things were getting bad, but they weren't like in a crisis like they are now. So when I left, when I still lived there, like the country was still livable. So of course I remember Venezuela before things got bad. Of course, yeah.
Can I just ask you a quick question? Do you have a
Yeah, yeah.
pen that you're clicking?
Me? No, no,
Yeah, this sounds like it's a pen or something that's clicking
no,
back
no,
and
no.
forth.
That's weird.
Okay, we'll
Yeah,
keep
yeah,
going. Yeah,
yeah,
go on.
yeah. So to answer
It
your
might
question,
be
of
it might be
course,
CSIS. They might be running out of pen or ink or something. I don't know.
yeah,
Okay, so you were saying that you were younger and it wasn't so bad. You started to see it
yeah,
that it deteriorated, and you managed to leave before it got really bad. So why don't you tell
yes.
us about what it was like before you left? Maybe the year before you left, how it was at that point.
How it was the year before I left? Well, it was still a the thing is, like, you have to understand how the Venezuelan economy works. So it's always been a country that, since oil was discovered in the 1910s, I think 1914 was the first the year that oil was first discovered.
Hmm.
It rapidly shifted. It rapidly shifted from being a agrarian economy, like focused on agriculture and production. Before 1914, the Venezuelan economy was diverse. It was focused on things like exporting coffee and cocoa beans and all kinds of agricultural products like fruit and vegetables and meat and all that. It was a very rural, land-based economy. after 1914, when oil was discovered, it shifted and it just became a completely oil exporting country. So that means when your economy depends on one product, especially a volatile one such as oil,
Right.
when prices are high, everything's good because there's lots of money coming into the country, so you can spend like a drunken sailor, right? But when things are bad, when oil prices are low, then that's loss of scarcity because there's not enough money to go around spending. So when I was living there, when I was born, 1999, and the 7 years I lived in Venezuela, it was one of the moments when oil prices were like at historic highs in the
Okay.
early 2000s. So because of that, even though there was lots of because of course communists, they destroy everything they touch, right? Even though there was lots of economic malaise, there was lots of destruction, the economy wasn't doing very well, like jobs were being shut, business were being expropriated, oil output was declining because the government was just wrecking the oil sector. Because prices were so high, there was still lots of money coming into the country, and so the government, it could artificially conceal all the crisis because they had just so much money available from oil revenue. So they could import food, or they could pay raise salaries, they could do all these kinds of things that you can do with an inflated budget. And because of that, because everyone knew that it was artificial, that this was going to last as long as oil prices were high, but this wasn't going to be forever. You could see that businesses were closing. The government was basically declaring war on the private sector. There was expropriating stuff. Poverty was beginning to increase. The currency was being devaluated, but it hadn't yet reached the point of crisis where this is just a full blown economic meltdown. It was a regular Latin American country with its problems, but still livable. Nothing like Africa or some parts of Asia where it's just abstract poverty everywhere. No, it was a decent country. Yeah, not developed by any means, but not the worst in the world either. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Well, one thing that
Yeah.
the one thing that I do want to ask is when I take a look at Canada, right, and its economy and its government and how it functions, and the demise of our standard of living, it seems to be it's not done by accident. It's done by design, right? So you would target certain areas like economy, defense, foreign relations, and you really try to destabilize a country. Now, comparing that to what Venezuela went through, how did they destabilize the country in order to bring it to its knees?
They went after practically by the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, when these guys got into power, they went after the only remaining productive sector of the Venezuelan economy, which was the oil industry. And during the how to explain it? From 1914 onwards, up until I want to say the mid 1970s, the Venezuelan oil economy was completely private. Everything like exploration of oil fields, drilling, extraction, transportation, absolutely everything was done according to by private corporations, like multinational international corporations, like for example like Chevron and Exxon and whatever. Starting in the mid 1970s, there was what we call the nationalization of oil, which basically the government came and completely took over all the infrastructure that had been set in place for decades by the international corporations. Before that, all the government did was they would allow a company to come in, let them do whatever they had to do, and then they would impose taxes and royalties on extraction. That's all the government was limited to. It was a very hands-off approach to the oil industry. The government said, okay, we own this thing. You want to come and you want to extract, you have to pay us, and then you can do whatever you want. 1970s onward, because before the communists, there was a social democratic party. They nationalized the oil sector, and they said, okay, everything that the private corporations used to do, we're going to do it now. And so that was, you can look it up. They created a state-run oil company called PDVSA, PDVSA. It was a state-owned corporation which basically administered the entire oil industry. So everything that the corporations used to do, they did it now. And of course, the thing that had to happen when everything falls under government jurisdiction happened. Corruption, mismanagement, scandals. So when the industry came into the hands of government, it really started declining in quality. And that was during the second half of the 1970s, during the 1980s, and then during the 1990s, which was the last decade of democracy before the communists took over, there was a series of reforms. And the people said, okay, we have to, it's been shown that government control over the oil sector doesn't work. We have to practically go back to what was happening before that. We have to hand it over to the private sector. And there was a whole series of legal and political reforms called, you can look it up too, it's called apertura, like opening. You're basically like opening the oil industry again to private investment and multinational corporations, and basically taking things back the way they were before the nationalization in the 1970s. And that was a process that started, I think it was in 1993, 1994, and it was well on its way until boom, 1999, when Chavez won the elections and his Communist Party took over. So that gives you a kind of a context of where the oil industry was by the time Chavez came into power. It was still officially in the hands of government, but there was already a process in motion of sort of like privatization, of slowly giving it back to the private sector and getting just the state and the government out of the oil industry whatsoever, and going back to being hands-off like it was for most of its history. So how did they do it? Immediately what they did was Chavez absolutely fired everyone, practically 20,000 employees of PDVSA, of the state-owned oil company, because they weren't being loyal to his agenda, and they spoke out and they protested. So he fired them, and then those 20,000 spots that were left vacant by the termination of those employees, he absolutely filled them with government cronies, people who had no idea whatsoever how to run an industry, especially such a complex one as oil. He put government cronies, his family members, people who were working in his party, people who served in parliament, people who served whatever. And you can imagine.
They were all on the Trudeau Foundation too, right?
Exactly. It's like your cronies, like your people. Like you fill a spot not because he's the most qualified or the best to run, but it's because he's the most loyal to you. So you can imagine what happened. It's like when you put 20,000 incompetent people to run an industry, it crashed. It absolutely crashed. That's what happened.
Now, one thing that I don't understand about Venezuela and its economy and its collapse is it would have been very difficult for Venezuela to do it on its own. Like they would have had to try really, really hard to actually destroy it. Now that being said, was there some sort of outside forces that were at play? Something to do with economic warfare coming from the United States with the SWIFT banking system and something along these lines, or was it all self-inflicted collapse?
Absolutely self-inflicted collapse. Absolutely nothing. That's the government propaganda that these guys like to roll around. Oh, there was an economic war from the United States or whatever, Europe, or the sanctions. No, don't believe any of it whatsoever. There was no outside influence whatsoever in destroying the Venezuelan oil industry. It was all entirely self-inflicted. It was entirely. And it started, like I said, when they replaced competent people with government cronies who had no idea what they were doing. And it took a while after that, because that was in 2004 when that happened, 2004. And the crisis, like I said, started only around 2014, 2015. So it was a slowly gestating crisis, because from the moment that these guys took over the industry until it completely collapsed, there was roughly a decade, right? But in that decade, it was just them, absolutely just them.
Yeah, and Yuri Bezmenov, he talks about how to destroy countries from within a lot, right? And he said before you could even get to the destabilization phase, where you destroy the economy, defense and foreign relations, you have to really infiltrate institutions within that country. Your primary focus as being on the educational system, and it takes 1, 2, 3 generations in order to change the perception of reality to where these people are basically demoralizing it themselves. So from they're transferring information from one generation to another, and then they basically grow up on this culture Marxism nonsense, where they try to change history, they try to change the names of words, they try to rewrite things that they don't like, or that they don't want to talk about. I mean, we're seeing that here in Canada right now, like in real time. Did this ever occur in Venezuela, and if it did, when?
So you're talking about to kind of understand you, like the infiltration of the institutions, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the infiltration, like how did you notice, or was there infiltration through the public education system to subvert individuals and then promote this basically Marxism, and this radical leftist ideology by eliminating names, changing definitions, promoting things like in Canada we're seeing right now with this LGBTQA plus.
I get you.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Is this something that you saw that happened, or that happened before the destabilization of Venezuela? Was it happening at the same time, or did it not happen at all?
I know, absolutely, it happened. I understand now. Absolutely. You have to keep, like, one thing to keep in mind, because this happened in the early 2000s. That was 20 years ago. The things that were being, like, the indoctrination in the education system was different than the one that's happening now in places like Canada or the US or Europe. Like today, it's more focused on, like you said, like critical race theory, gender ideology, all these kinds of like stuff, right? What happened in Venezuela was they literally started once Chavez took power and he took over the Ministry of Education. It's like they started rewriting completely Venezuelan history. And it started primarily in the textbooks. The textbooks that the Ministry of Education approved for the public education system, which is the majority of people, it was basically communist propaganda everywhere. They said, anti-Americanism, like just complete, like everything that's happening in Venezuela, it's because of the United States. Trying to call the heroes of the fathers of the independence movement, most prominent among them, Simon Bolivar, that he was a communist and that he was a Leninist, he was a Marxist, and that Chavez and his government, they are the ones who most closely adhere to the visions of the father of the nation, trying to indoctrinate people with just plain like communist ideologies straight out of Cuba, like the revolution and Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and everything. It was just complete communist indoctrination in the education system. Something you would see out of like China or the Soviet Union. It was complete brainwashing of the children and the students. And that was one of the things that first launched the first like protest against Chavez and his government, is when mothers specifically, which is kind of funny because that's what's happening now. All the backlash that you see in like the United States against like gender ideology and critical race theory is coming from mothers. Like Moms for Liberty is one organization. Well, the same thing happened in Venezuela when mothers realized that the textbooks that their children were using in school were basically just garbage. It was just basically communist propaganda masquerading as education. It launched a huge protest movement called you can look it up because it's all online. It's been a while, so it's been documented. It's called "Con mis hijos no te metas," like "Do not mess with my children." So to make the answer short, yeah, then definitely, these guys, when they took over, the first thing they did was subvert the education system and use it as a method to propagate their ideology without any sense of shame whatsoever. So yes.
Now you did bring up Moms for Liberty, right? And I've watched a few clips from them where the radical left is openly calling them a terrorist organization, and they're trying to demonize and even deplatform them. Now, did that happen to the organization that you spoke out of, or other organizations that were trying to fight back? Were they labeled as terrorist groups, and were they attacked or persecuted by the state?
Oh,
For doing so?
absolutely. They were called terrorists. They were called traitors, traitors to the fatherland, the traidor a la patria. It means that you're a traitor because you oppose what the government is saying. They were called agents of the Yankees. They were called anti-revolutionary. They were called subversive, like everything. Basically, anything you can think of to basically demonize a group of concerned citizens who are speaking out against the government indoctrinating their children. You can name it. Chavez, he called them everything.
Now, one of the other tools that you really use, other than the education system, is the media. I know in Canada right now we like to think that we have free press, but let's be honest, it's nothing more than state-approved propaganda. What did the media do? How did they play a role in the subversion and the destabilization of Venezuela, as you saw it in real time?
The media, believe it or not, when Chavez took office, the media was actually opposed to Chavez. All the media entities, institutions, they were overwhelmingly against Chavez because they saw through his lies pretty quickly, and they realized, okay, this guy, he's a communist. He wants to do what Fidel Castro did in Cuba. He wants to take over. So right from the get-go, the media was just like slamming Chavez, like exposing his corruption, exposing his lies. And so it's very different than what you're seeing right now with wokeness, because with wokeness, what you're seeing is like total and complete cooperation between like the media and the state, right? Because so basically the media has become the propaganda arm of the state, and they pretend to be neutral, they pretend to be autonomous, but what they really are is they are following the agenda that the state lays out for them. What happened during the early days of the Chavez's revolution in Venezuela was there was conflict between the media and the state. So what did he do? He completely took over the media. He shut down the institutions that he could not either buy off or intimidate into silence. The most famous one, you can look it up, being RCTV. That's a Spanish acronym for Radio Caracas Televisión. That was the most famous one. It was a historic news site in Venezuela, like this major news corporation. And because they refused to be bought off, and because they refused to change their tune because of Chavez's threats, he shut them down. And he started shutting down any media entity that went against his agenda. And you may ask, okay, how did he do that? Well, because he only did that because previously he had taken control of the judiciary. So of course it's illegal for the president to come and say, okay, because I don't like what you're saying, I remove your broadcast license and you can't broadcast any longer. And of course, when these people got shut down and they went to the judiciary to complain and saying, okay, this was a violation of our constitutional rights. Of course, when all the courts, all the prosecutors, all the judges are packed with Chavez loyalists, what do you think happened? The court said, okay, there was nothing illegal here. This is legal. And in a span of, I want to say, maybe 5 or 6 years, there was no independent media left in Venezuela whatsoever. No independent media.
So basically what the government did was, deplatform or eliminate any threat that they had, and really tried to paint themselves as the Ministry of Truth. I mean, we saw this over the last 3 years, especially when it came to COVID. But, where it was a little bit different here to what you're explaining is here it was not only the government that was doing this, right? It was also big tech, right? Your Googles and your Twitters and your Facebooks that were really trying to suppress the information, deplatform people, and really try to eliminate dissenting views. Now, when we take a look at the last 3 years, and in comparison to what you mentioned, how does it really differ? Like, what are the differences? Because it doesn't really sound like there is very much difference.
No, there isn't very much difference. I'd say it's basically the same plot. Basically, the government controlling the media and using it as a kind of like a propaganda arm, just to get out their message. I'd say the way it differs is that because here, more so in the United States than in Canada, because Canada, unfortunately, I don't see it. There is at least some semblance of like independence of the judiciary. the media entities and the government, they are only limited to deplatforming. Okay, you say something we don't like, we demonetize your channel, we kick you out, we censor you, we shadow ban you, etc. But that's because they can't do it like Venezuela did, which is okay, I don't like what you're saying, we just shut down your site and throw you in jail. So that's the big difference. That here it's limited only to like deplatforming, shadow banning, demonetization. There it was because the takeover was so radical and so complete and so fast that you said something the government didn't like, you went straight to prison. And dozens, I want to say hundreds even of journalists, reporters, they just got rounded up and thrown in jail because they were going against what the president said.
Now, did you recognize that they were changing laws as well? So you had a bunch of things coming with the media, and the media was pushing back a bit. But did they change laws? Like in Canada, we changed a bunch of laws to help them do this. C4, C11, C18. Did they do that? And did they go after guns at one point?
Absolutely. For the laws, the famous one, there was a bunch of laws, but the most prominent was, I'll give you the name. It's an acronym in Spanish. We called it in Venezuela, they called it Ley Resorte. So Resorte, Resorte. And that was basically a censorship bill. A censorship bill that's what the government used to transform the regulatory agency that existed prior to Chavez, by the way. In Venezuela, we called it CONATEL, which is like, in the translation is the National Telecommunications Commission, which before Chavez was basically limited to very technical things like regulating the broadcast wave and regulating what kind of things could be said at certain times, like to adult times, right? You couldn't like swear, you couldn't show nudity or that kind of thing, but very, very technical things. That went from being a regulatory commission that focused on technical matters, and it basically became overnight through this Ley Resorte. It became into basically a ministry of truth that had the power to shut down whatever it wanted to shut down if it was going against the government's message. So that's why you, for example, you had a radio station in one of these Venezuelan cities, and you spoke out passionately against the government, and you criticized Chavez, and you criticized his policies. Guess what? The day after, CONATEL showed up to your radio station, and you get shut down and thrown in jail. That's what happened.
Well, I can see how that would deter people from even talking at all. But can you recall a situation where somebody did speak up? And can you tell us what that situation was? Like, was there some sort of incident that happened? Someone spoke up, and then you can actually recall that they were taken away?
Yeah, of course. There was this guy called, you can write his name down too, Franklin Brito. Franklin, and his last name is Brito. And he was a farmer in southern Venezuela. I think he was in the southern state of Bolivar, and he was a generational farmer. Like, he had these huge lands which he dedicated to farming. Like his father was a farmer, his grandfather was a farmer. One of these things you see, for example, here in Alberta, which is like farming is a generational activity, right? It was the very same thing down there. Like, he was dedicated to agriculture and food production, and one day the government came to his property, his farm, and they expropriated it. And they said, okay, this is now public property of the revolution, and basically this is government property now, you can go away. And of course, imagine, like, in basically overnight, the government came and took his livelihood away. And so after that, he went to a radio station in Caracas, which was the capital. This was in the year 2009, 2010. Called Global Vision, and in Global Vision, he went on the air and he basically spoke out to the country what was happening, that the government was expropriating his property, that the government was suppressing his freedoms, that they seized his stuff without just compensation. And he went on the air, and that became a huge sensation. You can imagine across the country what was going on with this guy's farm. Well, guess what happened? After that, after he went on the air, like immediately after the show went on the air, government agents showed up, they seized him, and they threw him in a military prison where he died of a hunger strike. So.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's on here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So people can actually check up the entire story. But wow,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
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 So you have now. Do you have a story of anything being successful? Somebody protesting a bit and kind of being successful. This guy wasn't, but has there been a time where there was one, or they just quashed everything?
Oh no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. In 2002, there was actually, because Chavez took power in 1999. So 3 years later, in 2002, spurred in part by the mother's textbook movement, like "Con mis hijos no te metas," after he had fired all the 25,000 employees from the oil company PDVSA, and after it was revealed that Chavez was letting, like, he was down to some funky business with like the Colombian guerrillas and the Cubans, there was a lot of discontent in the military. And what happened was, in 2002, there was this massive protest called by the opposition in Caracas. And basically what happened was there was a coup against Chavez in 2002. There was a coup against Chavez. People went onto the streets. Over a million people marched in the streets of the capital that day, demanding an end to the Chavez government. It's 11 of April 2002. You can look up the images on YouTube to see how massive the whole protest were against the government. And of course, because there was discontent in the military, there was discontent in the private sector. There was discontent in the church too, which is, of course, a Catholic country, really influential, the church in Venezuela. Everything, it kind of like spilled out, and the military actually rose up and they removed Chavez from power. And they removed him. He was gone for 48 hours. Chavez was removed from power. Of course, what happened was that they couldn't get together after all these sectors: the military, the corporations, the business leaders, the labor unions. And what started as a coalition government to replace the Chavez administration, it collapsed in 48 hours. And because there was a vacuum of power, Chavez came back. And after he came back, after those 48 hours, he was removed from office. That's when he really put his agenda into overdrive, and the repression became worse, the censorship became worse, the corruption became worse. But yeah, definitely, it was not like this guy just came and the people did nothing. No, there was massive resistance against Chavez in the early days of his administration, so much that they even did a coup against him in 2002.
Wow. Now, before 2002, were there any political prisoners? Were there anybody that tried to come up against him, any groups, and then he kind of just quashed them through arresting them?
No. 2002, the first, I want to say, 1999, the first 3 or 4 years of his administration before that moment in 2002, where he was removed, and when he came back, he completely radicalized. He was still he tried to maintain some semblance that he was democratic. So there was still kind of freedom of expression. There weren't any political prisoners yet. He hadn't completely declared war against the private sector, started expropriating businesses. But it was only after 2002 where all this started. But before 2002, before that coup on the 11th of April, no, it was still, of course, he was still a left-wing guy, but not too far removed from all the left-wing guys you see in Latin America today. But no.
Okay. And then I guess after sorry, Kev, you get the next one. After 2002, did he go after the unions in any way? Did he quash them? Did he make them grow up? Did he work with them? Was there any work with the unions to try and control things?
Oh, absolutely. He took them over. The same thing that he did with the oil company, PDVSA, and with the regulation commission, CONATEL. He did the exact same thing with the labor unions, because actually one of the leaders of the coup in 2002 against Chavez, one of the guys who was the leaders of the movement, actually, he was one of the guys who organized everything, was a man named Carlos Ortega. He was the president of the National Labor Union Federation in Venezuela. It's called the CTV, Confederación de Trabajadores de Venezuela. And of course, because he knew that the labor unions were precisely one of his main areas of opposition, once he came back from the coup, he threw Carlos Ortega in jail, and he just completely removed all the administrative positions inside the labor unions and replaced them with cronies. So today, the CTV, which still exists, and it's still a thing in paper, it's the National Labor Union of Venezuela.
Oh, I guess he spoke too much. They kicked him off. So we'll wait for a second. I'm sure he'll come back. Kev, you're on mute.
I hope
So,
he
yeah, we'll
manages
get-
to find his way back, because he seemed to be like, bringing out a lot of details and similarities between the two countries. And one of the questions I was about to ask him, I was really interested in to hear in what he had to say. So, I hope he doesn't make us wait too long. But
Oh, I'm
what
sure
are
he'll be
your
right back.
what are your views so far on what everything he said, and then you're looking at the country of Canada and what we're living through right now, like what are your thoughts and your viewpoints on that?
Well, my initial ones are, boy, does he ever stay in contact, because he was young when he left, but he kept in contact to see what was going on. So that's good. That does also mean that information was coming out. So that's actually a decent sign. So he was able to get information out. I'm very curious. We just started getting into the labor control, so controlling the labor through unions and stuff like that. And I was about to get into like organized crime and stuff like that to see other ways they were controlling the populace. But yeah, it's kind of spooky. It's kind of spooky. I think right now I'm still at the very beginning stages, so I don't see the full parallels yet, but I do see where we're headed. So I hope he does come back soon. And then
Yeah.
up to this point.
Yeah, well, they say that history doesn't always repeat itself, but it often rhymes, right? So, you're never going to get a carbon copy from one country to another, but you're going to have telltale signs and warnings, caution, danger ahead, and some things that you can really point to, and say, okay, this country went through this because of this. This country is going through that because of that. And these are the similarities, so we can draw to conclusion that the end result is going to be more or less the same.
Yeah. And then when we get into the economics of it and we get into some of your charts and stuff and things like that, I think we'll see a lot more parallels, and it will kind of rhyme a little bit more than we're hoping it will. Yeah. I also wanted to get into how the rest of the world was helping or not helping. So were they able to get trade partners or anybody willing to help? Were there some humanitarian efforts or anything like that? Did the world try and bail them out? I'm curious on how the world kind of stood by and let this or watch this happen.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting, because I don't really know too much about Venezuelan history. All that I know, that it was like an oil superpower, had lots of wealth and lots of commodities like Canada did, and they went through an economic collapse, and they went from one of the most prosperous countries in the world to
Right.
living in extreme poverty in a matter of only a few decades, right? So and if it can happen there, it can really happen anywhere, right? Like sure, some of the differences here is we have this idea of the rule of law and whatnot, but we've seen our governments become more and more tyrannical, and what, maybe we're just seeing my idea of tyranny is somebody's idea of everyday life, but it is that 1,000 cuts to kill the to kill liberty, right? So it doesn't happen overnight. There's always a starting point, like I mentioned with Nazi Germany, right? They didn't start Nazi Germany by throwing people into gas chambers in the 40s. It started like 10-15 years before, and there were very early warning signs that this is what was going to happen, and so many people just ignored it. And what was so obvious to to anybody that had an objective view, people that were ideologically subverted, people that were taken over, people that were manipulated or did not actually have an objective view of reality, they basically bought into it, or they enabled it, and they were the ones that actually allowed it to happen.
Yeah. Okay. So Daniel, you kind of just cut off there, but yeah,
can you hear me?
continue. Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry, it's just my phone died. So I have to change the battery on this thing, and I was talking and boop, it went black. So sorry about that. I apologize.
Yeah, you're good right now.
Where were we again?
Well, yeah. Jason was talking about the labor unions and how the government infiltrated or flat out took them over.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
because I'm trying to find out how they controlled labor and then the people when they're doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. So they completely took over the labor unions, like the CTV. And the CTV, it's still around today, of course. It still exists on paper, and on paper, the law, it says, oh, It's supposed to represent the interest of workers and all the stuff that labor unions do. But in practice, nah, absolutely not. It's a white elephant, basically, just a institution filled with government cronies that basically suppresses the workers instead of helping them.
Right. So that's one way to crush the spirit of workers, which is a large piece of the population. Now, what about organized crime or gangs and stuff like that, controlling the other parts of the population? Was that something that he would work with? Would he control the gangs and organized crime as well?
Oh, big time, big time, big time. I mean, it became like insecurity. And when I say insecurity, like crime, became the quickest form of repression under Chavez, because when, of course, it's a natural reaction that if there's crime on the streets and if every time you go out, there is a non-zero chance that you're going to get robbed, at gunpoint, that your cars are going to get stolen, that you're going to get kidnapped. The people simply don't go out. They say, no, I'm going to stay inside my house because I don't want to risk my life by just going out to the street. So when they realized that they could weaponize insecurity, which was a problem before, I'm not going to say that Chavez invented crime or he invented like insecurity. No, it was a problem before, but at least governments before him had taken measures to combat crime. When he came to power, he said, okay, we can repress the people indirectly through letting crime flourish. And because there's so much crime on the streets, the people are not going to go out to the streets and they won't protest, they won't march, etc. Crime just exploded. Everything, murders, kidnappings, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, illegal mining, like everything. Like, I swear, grab the Venezuelan criminal code and toss it up in the air, and whatever page it lands on, that crime, it basically increased tenfold under Chavez. Even like kidnapping became a very lucrative method of businesses for gangs in Venezuela. Like they used to call it express kidnapping, secuestro express. For example, people went out to the bank, or they were in an ATM or doing just whatever in their daily lives. They would get kidnapped by this group of gangs and they would be held for ransom. And the government, just all these kinds of awful crimes we can imagine, and the government took absolutely no steps whatsoever to combat it.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. It was like nothing was going on. They didn't send the police. They didn't send out the army. They didn't create new crimes in the criminal code to combat it. It was like nothing was happening. And why didn't they do anything? Because it was beneficial for them for crime to be flourishing on the street. Not only because, like I said, you maintained the population scared, and you kept them locked inside their homes, and they couldn't go out and protest, but because many of those crimes were also beneficial to the government in terms of business. And it's around the same time when you saw that the government started becoming heavily involved in drug trafficking too. And they started, and since because neighboring Colombia is right next to Venezuela, that was the same time that the government was waging war on drug trafficking in Colombia against the cartels and against the guerrillas, specifically the FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. Many of these like drug trafficking cartels and guerrillas that used to operate and traffic cocaine out of Colombia, because the Colombian government was waging war on them and they were in war against the state, Chavez, he let them into Venezuela. So they basically moved across the border and they set up shop completely inside Venezuela, where they continued trafficking Colombian cocaine, and the government took its cut of drug trafficking. So basically, crime is a very, very big business. And not only did it increase exponentially after Chavez came into power, but also the government started profiting massively. So much that, dare I say that, for a while now, cocaine has been more lucrative than oil.
Yeah, that's the way it is in most markets, isn't it? I have a couple questions here for you, Daniel, if we can just jump to them quick. We have a super chat here and asking you if Soros was involved. So do you know if there was outside influence on a global level like that, Soros?
That I recall, no. Chavez with Soros, it doesn't come to mind. But Soros is definitely in there now in Venezuela. Because you're starting to see all these Soros-esque movements starting to pop up, like gender ideology and radical feminism and all that stuff that you would associate with open society, and it's starting to happen there now. So I can definitely say that Soros, he is investing today in Venezuela, but But when Chavez was around like 20 years ago, I'm not sure. I don't think so, really. I don't think so, because 20 years the discourse was different, and there wasn't so much of these identity politics that Soros invests in, right? So yeah.
Well, we can also point out that Soros was a little bit more quiet back then too. He's a lot more public now than he used to be.
Exactly.
So he might have had his fingers back then early.
Maybe.
I have another
I would have
question
to do
here
some
for
research on it. I would have to do some research on it, but right now I don't know. Yeah.
Usually where you do find him, he was there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's there now,
Yeah,
he might have been there for a while.
Maybe. Yeah. I have to look into it, of course.
He's a long-term thinker. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Another question for you from Schmidt House Podcast, so our friend Zach. Daniel, what are your thoughts on Pierre Poilievre's wife? Do you think she shares your opinion on things, and would you trust her as far as having influence over Pierre if he were to become PM?
Because
I guess she's from there, right?
Yeah, she's Venezuelan too, you know. No, I don't. Not because I have a problem with her in general. It's because I don't, and this is where I'm going to get really controversial. I don't trust the Conservative Party of Canada. I think they are, at best, they are controlled opposition. So whatever the opinions the wife of the party leader may have, I just think it's irrelevant in the grand scheme of things when the entire party apparatus is basically compromised. So no, I don't have any hopes in that whatsoever.
Okay. Now, Kevin, it's your turn, bud. We can switch to you now.
Yeah, one of the questions that I wanted to ask was, in Canada, we've seen it. They looted our gold reserves. We had a fairly large amount, a bunch of accumulated gold, and over the span of a couple of decades, 3-4 decades, it basically dwindled down to nothing. Where in 2015, we got rid of all last remaining gold in our reserves, and gold is one of the things that really provides an economy with with security, right? So it's a good way to secure a country through their gold reserves. Now, what was Venezuelan's gold reserves? What did they do? Did Chavez have any influence on the reserves? I know he wanted to liberate the gold. How did stuff like that work out in terms of Venezuela?
Yes, actually, Venezuela used to have huge amounts of gold. The precise figure right now it escapes my memory, but I would have to look it up actually. What the reserves were in the 20 years ago, early 2000s, but they were quite significant, and of course they were stored. The largest deposits, they were stored in it was either the United States, in the Bank of the United States. Yes. There was two large reserves. Two of the largest reserves of Venezuelan gold. One was in the United States, and the other was in England, in the Bank of England, and the other one, I can't remember exactly where in the U.S. it was.
It would probably be on the COMEX in Chicago and the LBMA in London.
Probably one of those places. Probably it was somewhere in the States. That first lot of gold, the one in America. In the year 2010, 2011, around there, so roughly about just over a decade ago, Chavez ordered it repatriated to Venezuela because he said, "Oh, we can't have all our gold in the hands of the Yankee imperialists. They're going to steal it from us because they're my enemies and imperialism." So he ordered the gold be repatriated to Venezuela, be flown from the U.S. To Caracas, and you can imagine what happened. Of course, he was accusing the Yankees of wanting to steal all the gold from him, and the Yankees gave every last bit of the gold back. They put it on a ship, and it went to Venezuela. Guess what happened to the gold once it entered Venezuela? Vanished. It disappeared, vanished. Nobody knows where the gold is. Of course, we know where it is. They stole it, and it's hidden in accounts all over the world, belonging to all these government officials, right? But they did. That was a feast of embezzlement and corruption when they stole all of the gold that was stored in the United States, and they tried to do the same thing recently too. I think that was in 2019, 2020, so a few years back, with the other lot that was stored in England. But this time, because the government of the United Kingdom had imposed sanctions on the Maduro, because when Chavez died, Maduro took over. They refused to give back the gold. So that gold, for now at least, the part of the gold that was in England is still there and it's safe. But the part that was in the United States is lost, just stolen, gone.
Okay, well, that was my next question. Was what countries kind of contributed or caused more problems for you? So you mentioned the UK there with the gold. Were there any other countries that were trying to assist you guys or make it worse?
Assist Chavez or assist the opposition?
Really, the people like coming along saying, "Hey, look, there's a lot going on here. Maybe we should step in." Were there any countries offering humanitarian aid? Were there any countries actually assisting Chavez to do this?
Unfortunately, no. And that's one of the sad things about the Venezuelan crisis. No, because Chavez had just so much money, product of, like, you really have to understand, like the the days when oil was like over $100 a barrel, and Venezuela, before the industry collapsed like a decade ago, it used to produce approximately, I think, was it like 3 to 4 million barrels of oil a day? So you can imagine when you had oil per barrel at $120 per barrel, 3 to 4 million of those a day, you can like put them in the calculator. That's how much money was coming into the country from oil revenue alone. Like Chavez was literally sitting in a gold mine. And of course, that money, he didn't just use it to advance his agenda inside the country. He also used it to buy consciences and buy friends internationally, right? So all these institutions, specifically in the Americas, that are supposed to function in moments when there's a tyrannical government that is repressing the rights of its citizens inside a country. For example, the OAS, like the Organization of American States, and Mercosur, and the United Nations and everything, all these international organizations that in theory are supposed to like work in times of crisis, because Chavez was just, he had so much money to spend, he would literally invest in other countries in order to secure their votes in the memberships of these organizations. And you saw that, for example, in the OAS, the Organization of American States. Since each country inside the Americas is a member inside the organization, and it's one country, one vote. All these little like Caribbean countries, like the small countries, like you can imagine, like Barbados and St. Lucia, and all these little insignificant island countries, Chavez would invest in them using oil revenue. I can't remember the name of the program that he set up. It was, let's see, it has a name. It was actually a program that Chavez, using the oil company PDVSA, he would invest using oil revenues in all these island countries. And guess what happened? All these countries, when it came time to introduce like resolutions and motions inside the Organization of American States to actually impose sanctions against Venezuela or censor Venezuela or like reprimand Venezuela because of their human rights violations, they voted against, because they were being paid by Chavez to vote against them. And that, what happened in the Organization of American States, it happened everywhere. It happened in the United Nations. It happened inside the trading bloc that's in South America called Mercosur. It happened everywhere. So he basically, Chavez bought the conscience of everyone because he had so much money to spend and to pass around. So unfortunately, no, like we were completely alone. We were completely alone in this fight internationally. Like not even the United States stepped in. It was just like people, they didn't care what was happening. They didn't care.
Well, Canada's greatest export is condemning other countries for doing things that they do. So I'm surprised. Was Canada actually doing anything like that? Where we Canada saying, "Hey, you guys should do things better. You should be better to your people. Give them free rights. Give them free speech." Or were we very quiet at that time?
They were. I imagine there must have been, because of course there always is a resolution from the Global Affairs Canada, or maybe the Department of State in the United States, saying, "Oh, we condemn wholeheartedly the electoral fraud or the suppression of rights or the corruption. We condemn. We are deeply concerned." That was one, deeply concerned. But okay, I mean, what is a resolution if you're not actually going to follow it up with actions, like like actual sanctions or force? You know what I mean? So it was dead letter, basically.
Yeah, I think those resolutions were just reminders for the future when they were in power again. They're like post-it notes for 10 years later. Kev, you had a question?
Yeah, so you mentioned, Venezuela had their economy was built around oil, right? And
Yes, yes.
I'm not sure exactly, but they're in the top five in the world for oil fields, right? They have one of the largest oil
It's first in the
deposits in the
world.
world. So
First in the
first in
world.
the world. Okay,
First in
so
the
they're
world.
number one in the world in terms of oil deposits,
Yeah.
and at $120, $100, even where it's sitting at right now at $70 a barrel, this would make Venezuela one of the most resource-rich countries in the world, right? Based on oil,
Absolutely.
based on gold. Yeah. So if that can happen to a country like Venezuela, what does it just say that it can't happen, to other countries? And I did touch a base on gold, right? Like I know for the actual country of Canada, we have no gold. It sounds like you guys have a little bit that is stored in the vaults in England. But what about the people? Did they ever move? Your family, your relatives, anybody you talk to in your circle, did they ever moved away from the bolivar into precious metals to try to protect themselves from the crazy bout of inflation?
You want to know something? But before I answer that question that you mentioned about the gold, you said we Canada has no gold, but in Venezuela we have gold stored in what's left in the Bank of England. No, we have the gold that is stored in the Bank of England, and we also have lots of gold in the ground. You can look it up, and I want you to look this up so you can realize what's happening there. In the southern state, like Venezuela southern state, it's called Bolivar. There is something called to say it in Spanish, it's the arco minero. It's like the mining arc. It's like this massive area, and some of it's inside a national park, actually, the Canaima National Park. Do you ever know the waterfall, like Angel Falls?
Yeah, yeah,
It's the
yeah.
highest
We're like
waterfall
one
in
of
the
the
world.
largest ones. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the largest one in the world. Yeah. Well, that waterfall, it's inside a national park, Venezuelan national park called Canaima National Park, and that park is massive. And part of this mining arc is inside the national park. And what they realized is that there are massive deposits and reserves on not only gold in the ground there, but all kinds of like minerals and even rare earth elements that you can imagine,
Lithium.
right? Lithium, like what's it called, like bauxite, all everything, just everything, like all these things that are very useful today in today's economy because they're used to make a technology, like cell phones and everything, right? So what happened is that the government is actually, they went in a few years ago. This started around maybe 2016, 2015. So maybe 7-8 years ago. And they are completely destroying the national park, absolutely deforestation, like completely, in order to get out the gold on the ground.
Wow.
And you can see the images. And they have even committed acts of like mass murder against the indigenous people who are inside that land, who live inside that national park, because this is traditional territory, right? The government came in, they've completely killed and shot all of the indigenous people, and they have completely wrecked that area. And it's actually heartbreaking, because when you see like like images from the air of what that area was before, like before 2015, and what it is now, it is like environmental genocide, I would call it. It's crazy. They are literally destroying the environment in order to get to the gold and steal it. They are that criminal. So I want you to look it up. It's called here. All right, I can type in the chat, right?
But you won't see it on the screen.
You won't see it on the
So
screen. It's called Arco Minero. Arco Minero. It's called ARCO, Arco, and Minero is MINERO.
Yeah, go ahead.
And there's
Go ahead and put it in a private chat, and then Padge will put it on the screen. Okay, Padge. So wait for that private chat from Daniel.
Arco Minero. There we go.
Yeah, hands-free chatting.
And then the organization that is raising awareness about this destruction is called SOS or NOCO. But yeah, so that was the thing, that Venezuela is incredibly rich, not only in oil, but in gold and all kinds of elements or minerals or whatever that you can imagine, right? Natural gas too. But to answer your question,
that actually brought another question up. So when you finish that, I'll bring another one up.
Yeah.
You said, what was the question again? Sorry.
The question that I was
Yeah.
that I was wondering is, well, we know the similarities to the Venezuelan economy and the
Yes.
Canadian economy in terms of resources. In Canada, a lot of the gold that is in the ground is not actually Canadian, right? We've basically corporations have moved in and laid claims on this, so they're not really our gold. And it sounds like in Venezuela, the government, instead of using corporations, are just going out and doing it themselves and robbing it for themselves. So that's kind of similar, but on the ground, the people, what did the people do? Did they sense economic turmoil coming? Did they try to get rid of their fiat currency? I believe it's the bolivar. They tried to move into gold, into silver, and try to avoid the pain of hyperinflation that ultimately swept Venezuela. And I do have a chart that I want to bring up here. It's basically over the last since we'll even go into since 2020, and this is the price of gold in Venezuelan dollars. 1 ounce of gold. 1 ounce of gold. So the chart doesn't really go back that far, but we'll bring it up here. So back in 2020, this is like the COVID era. It would cost you 80 or 90,000, bolivars to buy an ounce of gold. Now we had this massive hyperinflationary boom where it's going to cost you $16 million to buy 1 ounce of gold. What do the people do to avoid this type of pain?
We could. I mean, I'm being honest here. Like, I'm being quite honest. Like, we could do an entire 4-hour program on this alone. On the bolivar and the dollar and gold and whatever, and it's very difficult to explain. So bear with me here because it's very sui generis. It
take your time. Yep.
It's only something that happened inside Venezuela, and to a foreigner like you guys, it's kind of like it just boggles the mind. So here's what happened. I'm gonna try to explain it as best as I can. This is very complicated, so if you need clarification or if you want to move on, just tell me. Let me know, okay? So here's what happened. Before 2003, I really want to put emphasis on how much, on what absolute game changer the 2002 coup was. The Chavez before the coup and Chavez after the coup, they were completely different people. Chavez after the coup, he just took his mask off and he was the most vicious tyrant ever. Before that, he was a vicious tyrant, but at least he hit it, and he hit it well. In 2003, the year after the coup, he imposed currency controls. Before that, before 2003, 2002 and before, 1990s, 1980s, 1970s, it was just like it is here in Canada. In Venezuela, you could go to a bank or you could go to any financial institution or whatever, or an exchange site, and you could freely buy Venezuelan bolivars, buy Venezuelan dollars, and give Venezuela bolivars. It was a completely free exchange market, right? What they did was in 2003, they imposed currency controls. So they said, and it's before, because my mom tells me that before Chavez, you could go into any of the banks and you could come out with dollars in your hand. It was that simple. It was nothing crazy, the same way you do it here. But in 2003, they imposed a currency control system called Cadivi. It's CADIVI, Cadivi. And that said, basically, okay, the system that was in place before, where people can freely buy dollars independently, directly with their bank, it's over. And now, if you want to buy dollars, you have to do it directly through the government, through the Ministry of Finance, through this institution that we set up called Cadivi, right? So here's where it gets complicated. At the same time that they set exchange rates, the government said, okay, for each dollar, it's going to cost you, let's say, I think that the exchange rate was 10, I think it was 10 bolivars or something like that. It was pretty straightforward. It said, okay, each dollar is going to cost you this amount, and you have to do it through Cadivi and the Ministry of Education. At the same time that was happening, the bolivar, which is Venezuela's currency, was being devalued massively. So it went from being something like 100 bolivars per dollar to something being like a million or something, like 100,000. It was an absolute bananas, bonkers devaluation. It was something that was like a million%. It was something crazy. So what happened?
At some points there was like 10% a day. I was hearing
exactly.
like the price of coffee would be different in the morning to the next morning.
Like when you would walk in the store, prices would change. So what like this happened? People when for example, people went to buy eggs in the supermarket, they went running to the fridge because the prices, by the moment you grab the carton eggs to when you reached the cashier at the checkout line in the front, the price already changed. So you can imagine how bad hyperinflation was. Like people literally, they did their grocery shopping like on speed walk, running, because by the time they were finished, prices had already gone up. But here, how do I explain this? They were devaluing the currency, but the thing is that the exchange rates that they had set in the central bank through this Khedive organization, they stay frozen. So for example, let's say one bolivar cost you like $1. So $1 cost you like 10 bolivars. You could easily acquire, for example, on the black market, because of these massive devaluations, 1 million bolivars. And then those 1 million bolivars, once you went to the central bank, here, I'm going to get a calculator. Because it's
So as he's checking that, Kev, the gold, I think the inflation rates and stuff like that, are you seeing any ticks like that happening here? Are you seeing that price skyrocket here right now? Or are we still in that pre-COVID, flat spot before it hit the hockey stick?
Well, if you look at the currency supply and the amount of M2 that's being produced in the system in Canada, I mean, it is going into that hockey stick, vertical pattern, but it's nowhere near what the Bolivar has been going through, right? Like that is absolutely insane, and we're the problem with with us right now versus Venezuela. At least with Venezuela, the people can move into the U.S. dollar. They can move into precious metals if they didn't want to hold their bolivar. But in the situation that's going on right now, it could be national like large traded currencies that go through something similar to this, because this is ultimately all how fiat currencies fail. They hyperinflate and they go to zero, right? There's not a single example in the world of a fiat system that hasn't gone to zero. So we know that this is going to happen. It's just a matter of time. And Ludwig van Mises, he coined this phrase over 100 years ago with crack up boom. So if you really want to understand what is going on in terms of like monetary and fiscal policies, you can just go into Google and type in von Mises crack up boom, and it's an article from Investopedia, and it really outlines a lot of things that we've actually been doing that is going to lead to a currency collapse. And what Daniel was leaving off on is when we basically had to go through the Ministry of Finance, right, to actually deal with getting the bolivars, and you could no longer go to a bank. What came to my mind was, could this be something that they're going to try to achieve with central banking digital currencies, right? So, that's something that came to my mind there. I'm not sure if you saw it the same way. Is that something that you noticed too as well, Jason?
No, I haven't been paying attention to that at all, dude. This is why I'm pulling you in on this. I have not been paying attention to that. And I want to do an entire episode on digital bank or central bank digital currencies, especially on the Canada side of things, because I haven't touched that subject enough. In fact, while we wait for Daniel to get back, and I think he's connecting right now, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, but so, the way that there's the central banking digital currencies is, first of all, we already have digital currencies, right? 97% of the dollar is in digital form. Only 3% is, cash. But, you can go to your CBICs, your TD banks, or, you can pick and choose from what bank you want to deal with in Canada. There's only 5 or 6, and then you have a bunch of, co-ops and whatnot. But ultimately, you have 5 big banks and then a central bank that is on top of them. What the CBDC is, and actually there was news coming out of the IMF saying that in order for a central bank digital currency to work, they could not allow national central banks to fragment it. So basically what they're saying through the IMF is they're going to be relying on institutions like the Bank of International Settlements, which is, the central bank of central bank. You have the BIS on top, then you have the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and, you make your way all the way down to, the smaller central banks like in Canada. But what they're ultimately saying is that they want to make a one world global central banking system and eliminate all national central banks through imposing this through the IMF and the Bank of International Settlements. And that's one thing that I really thought of when Daniel said that, they were no longer allowed to go to, the banks. They actually had to go to, the Ministry of Finance to actually do this. So they basically, heavily controlled their currency and basically nationalized it from the banking sector. And so that was one thing that came to light when he's talking about that was, it made me think about digital currencies, central banking digital currencies.
But one thing is that because this was sorry about that. I lost connection. I think my Wi-Fi failed.
No. Just put a couple more quarters in next time so it stays on longer. Okay.
Yeah, I was just trying to transition you back into the.
Okay. Yeah.
Digital quarters, right? We got to keep you on.
Of course. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's all your floor, bud.
To kind of like follow up on that. But because, like I said, I know it's a bit complicated, but the main takeaway is this: like. Because all of this was happening like before Bitcoin became well known and just before the cryptocurrency industry got off the ground and started becoming like an alternative for people to secure their money, there was no because the Venezuelan bolivar is failing, I am going to invest in Bitcoin, or I'm going to invest in gold or silver. People saw, the Venezuelan bolivar sucks. I am going to buy US dollars because US dollars is a strong currency. Of course, we know that that's not the case and that fiat currency all over the world is kind of like the same garbage. But back then, people didn't see it that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, the U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency, right? So, if you're going to go out of if you're going to move out of the bolivar and you're not buying gold, or you're not buying, cryptos, you're buying the U.S. dollar.
Exactly.
Now, I have a side question. I don't know if you can help me on this one, but did BRIC ever come around and maybe start poking around? Was there any desire for Venezuela to join the BRIC organization?
No, never, because Brazil, Russia, India, China, and I guess they throw in South Africa in there sometimes too, like
South Africa, yeah. So BRICS,
South Africa, BRICS, yeah. But no, there was
maybe they couldn't fit the V in there. It just sounded too weird. Brevix.
So they just dropped it. Very weird.
Yeah.
No. There was never any talk of Venezuela joining BRICS because Chavez, he gave these sweetheart deals to Russia and China, and he was also, and Brazil too. But Brazil was more like an ally. Russia and China, he gave these deals where. Venezuela, basically, he would give them free oil, like the oil that belongs to the country that would otherwise be sold in the international market. He signed these cooperation deals with Russia and China, and he would give them for free, basically, in exchange for support in the international system. So whenever somebody tried to do something to call out Chavez or implement sanctions or condemn him forcefully in an international organization, Brazil, Russia, and China would come in and they would kind of like sabotage everything and stop everything. So no, there was never any intention of Venezuela joining BRICS because like the BRICS partners, the BRICS members, they didn't see Venezuela as kind of like an equal member to welcome into the bloc. They kind of saw it as a country where we can extract resources for pennies on the dollar, basically. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So Kev, do you have any more follow-up on digital, or you want to just keep going with?
Well, from what he was saying, it sounds like Venezuela, Canada is to North America what Venezuela was to South America. That's what they do here, right? They extract our resources at pennies on the dollar, and ultimately it's the people that are left holding the bag, and everybody gets rich. And in the political arena, you have a massive kleptocracy, and whereas the people are starving, record food bank demand, and we have riddled with massive amount of debt when we should be one of the richest nations in the world based on our resources.
Exactly.
So it's very similar.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now let's talk a bit about
absolutely.
the people not fighting back or not doing a revolt or anything like that. Do you think that would have helped? And let's talk a bit about what people can do to counter some of this.
Well, the thing is, like, and I remembered earlier you asked about guns. Am I correct? And I never answered that.
Yeah, I asked if they were suppressing guns, taking away guns, doing that kind of stuff, like we're doing here right now.
That was one of the things too that actually that when Trudeau passed his gun control order in council in 2020, and I believe they're legislating again. They're doing something with gun control.
Yeah, C-21 isn't. C-21's in
yeah.
the Senate right now.
Yeah. Basically, the anti-gun discourse and trying to take the people's guns away. That was something that
no, it's to lower the crime rate and make things safer in a city bill.
Oh yeah, absolutely, because the criminals that commit crime, they acquire firearms licenses. They don't illegally smuggle in them from the border. But whatever.
Well, they just like the CPC so much they're going to listen to liberal laws. I think that's what they're thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Could
have worked.
That was the same thing. It could have worked. Yeah, that was the thing that happened too. It was a massive gun control law, and basically gun ownership became illegal everywhere in Venezuela. The government conducted massive raids across properties, and where it was known that the owner of that house had firearms, because before gun ownership was actually legal, believe it or not. You had to go through, register, acquire a license, go through a safety course, very similar to the way it is here. It's not completely as free as it is in the United States, but also not like prohibited. Like whatever person that wanted to acquire firearms could acquire firearms. They passed a background check, did a safety training course, applied for a license, etc. Chavez came and he changed that, and he said, okay, nobody is going to have firearms here because of the very same reasons they're using it now, because the guns are dangerous and the criminals use the guns, and if we keep guns off the street, we're going to make our community safer. It's like basically he was reading from the same script that Trudeau is reading now, and the Democrats are reading down south of the border. And guess what happens when you take the legal guns away from the legal gun owners, but you don't do anything about the criminal gangs that are using illegal guns in violation of the laws? Exactly. You left the people defenseless, and the criminals basically have free reign to do whatever they want. So that was another method of control. But to answer your question is what did people do? People fought. They protested, they marched, so much that even like they removed Chavez from power. They rose up in revolt, and there was a coup against them. But I think what's going on, what happened is that Lenin, I don't know who it was. It was Lenin or Stalin. Some of you might correct me, who said that we have to organize our own opposition before a real one rises up against us, or something along those lines.
Trudeau.
That's Trudeau. It could have been both Trudeau. It could have been Trudeau, of course, but
I didn't say senior or junior. It could have been one of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This idea of organizing and infiltrating and corrupting your opposition so it dances to your tune. That's something that also Chavez figured out pretty quickly, and the opposition that had been fierce against him in the early days of his administration, it was very quickly either thrown in jail, killed, exiled, thrown out of the country, and the few that remained inside, he just bought them off. He just bought them off completely with his sweetheart corruption schemes, right? ranging from everything from oil deals to like the central banking, money laundering, exchange dollar that I tried to explain previously, to all kinds of sorts of illegal corruption schemes. And the opposition was not immune from that. So the opposition on the outside, it showed this image to the world that they were fighting against Chavez and they were like going opposite to him, but really they were just negotiating under the table and basically cooperating with him. So there was a total, I want to say from the year, like in the post-coup time, like maybe 2004, 2005, after that, there was a complete and total lack of real and effective opposition. And the opposition, it gave the semblance that it was trying to remove Chavez from power. It was fighting for Chavez, but what was really going on was it was basically trying to keep Chavez in power. It was clearly corrupt, infiltrated, compromised. So yeah, that's the reason why. That is the reason why this thing hasn't been over. Why these damn communists are still in power 25 years later. It's not because the people, when they took power, the people basically bowed their heads and they gave up, they surrendered. No, the people fought. It's just that the people realized way too late that the representatives of the organizations that they were trusting to lead the fight, in this case the Venezuelan opposition, was compromised, and they were agents of the regime. And when they figured that out, and they figured it out eventually, it was too late. It was too late. That's what happened.
So this coup in 2016, right? Is that when it was? Or
the
2006?
Coup? 2002.
Yeah.
2002.
2002. Right, and it didn't
11th
succeed.
of April 2002. It didn't succeed. No, it didn't.
Right, but it kind of gave the government a lot of reasons to crack down harder, make that whip stronger, and step on.
That is precisely it.
So was that their Jan 6 and our convoy? Was our convoy supposed to be that, and was Jan 6 supposed to be that?
That is. If you want to like kind of
look at the parallels here.
That is that.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is the Jan 6. That is the trucker convoy. That is the COVID, we might say too, right? I mean okay. The opposition has risen up against us. There's a crisis, and we have to use this crisis to completely crack down and finish suppressing freedoms and liberties and just taking over. Kind of like the 1933 Reichstag fire, right? So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but we didn't fall for that. We didn't get violent like they did in other places, or go straight for a straight up coup.
Yeah.
So maybe the blueprints were there to try and entice us to do it, but we didn't take that step. Yeah. Exactly. So Kevin, you had a question. You were next.
Yeah, so like if you're a government, right, and the only tool you have in your toolbox is a hammer, then every problem has to look like a nail, right? So they always come down with the full force on any opposition. And one thing that you mentioned was that once they realized it was too late, right? And Yuri Bezmenov really outlined this. After you destabilize a nation. Well, first you demoralize a nation. It could take 20 or 30 years through education. Then you destabilize it through attacking your economy, your military, your foreign defense. That could take another 2 to 5 years, and then you have a crisis. And then with a rapid change of political and economic structure, you enter in the phase of normalization. And, this is a phase that can last indefinitely. So once you're in the normalization phase, that is it. Like there's no going back. It's game over. Is that the stage that Venezuela is in right now? And do you see something like that happen to Canada? Because you said you left Venezuela, you came to Canada, and, then you started noticing all these similarities. So like as a Canadian citizen that's already gone through this, like what are some of the some advice that you can give to us, people that haven't lived through this, or people that don't really have the experience that you do?
And make sure that advice doesn't include us having to leave the country. So is there some advice that we could do while we're still here before we take off?
Oh my God. I mean,
because your advice might be to go find another country that's not spoiled yet, which is getting tougher out there.
I mean, but that is kind of like a final emergency exit when all options have failed, right? I mean, well, guys, I mean,
come on, Canada's counting on us, Daniel. Fix us.
Canada's problems are just so, I want to say, like deep and so entrenched that it's just a multitude of factors that are combining to lead us like where we are now. And I think one thing if you want to hear advice, is and unfortunately I see this in a lot of conservatives or right wingers here in Canada. They think that everything was going fine until Trudeau came in. Basically, Canada is where it is right now because of Trudeau. And
Some would say
I
Harper.
respectfully disagree. I mean, I don't think so. I think Trudeau is not the cause of Canada's problems. I think Trudeau is a symptom of Canada's problems. I think we got Trudeau because Canada was not doing well, and it's not that Canada is not doing well because we have Trudeau. I mean, it's just.
Oh,
I don't
he's
even
going to
know
come
where to
back.
begin. I mean, do you hear me?
Yeah. You're coming back now.
Yeah. Okay.
So you said Trudeau's a symptom of the problems. The problems created Trudeau,
Yes,
and that's
yes.
where we're headed with this as well. Yeah.
Yes. I think honestly, the problem is here in Canada, and the problem won't have and I said this previously in the space that I spoke to a few weeks ago when I first met you guys, is that this Canada, at least, I can't speak for other countries because I don't live there and I don't know their situation as well as I do now, as well as I do Canada's. But we have to be mentally prepared that this isn't going to be an easy fix. That okay, we just elect a conservative government and Pierre Poilievre gets in there and everything's going to be fine and dandy. We're going to hold hands by the fire singing kumbaya. No. This is. It took decades, years for us to get here, and it is going to take the same amount of time, maybe even longer, to get out. And what is the cause of here is that the left, the Canadian left, and kind of tying it back into the Venezuelan situation, has completely not only infiltrated all the institutions of Canadian society, but they have infiltrated them to such a degree that they have molded them in their image. And so basically they modern Canada is a creation of the Canadian left. And for example, what is the most palpable example, the one that I can say, okay, what is an example? For example, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and we are getting into some controversial territory. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, in my opinion, because I studied political science, it is not a classically liberal document like the U.S. Bill of Rights is. It is the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is a progressive document. It is a left-wing progressive document. It is Pierre Trudeau's personal agenda codified basically as the highest law in the land. And all the things, for example, to bring it recently, affirmative action, for example. Affirmative action is this huge controversial thing in the United States, and we recently saw how the U.S. Supreme Court declared it illegal. They overturned decades of precedent. They declared it illegal and unconstitutional for universities and other places to discriminate on the basis of race, because of course, if you are discriminating someone on the basis of their race, whatever the purpose might be, it's illegal. It's illegal under the Bill of Rights. Well, here we have affirmative action codified into the Constitution, Section 15, subsection 2. Here, so that's an example. Just what the Americans are up in arms against, and it's this huge controversial scandal and the subject of debate. We have it codified here as the highest law in our land, and that I can say that to you. It's the same, not only with the Constitution, but the way the special treatment that Quebec has, the way the left has completely taken over things like the judiciary, because at least in the United States they have two kinds of judges. They have like originalist judges and they have like progressive judges. Here in Canada we don't have originalist judges. We just have proponents of like the so-called living tree variant, where it's basically the Constitution means whatever we feel it means, and because it has to adapt. So it basically gives judges free reign to legislate from the bench and to impose their personal views, masquerading as constitutional law. So it's I don't even know where to begin, you guys. Like, I mean, if I were to speak, because we only have 2 hours, right? We only have 2 hours. I mean, we have 6 or 7 hours here to make my case. It's like we don't. So I don't know. I think my recommendation is, if you're asking me, okay, what you recommend in order to begin fighting back against all this stuff, is don't for a single second believe that because you live in a developed country, because you live in a country that is a member of the G7, that is still, despite everything, one of the best countries in the world to live, even though that's declining, that it's right to the United States, that because you have centuries old tradition of democracy and rights, don't believe for 1 second that can't change. Don't believe for 1 second that is guaranteed just because you are living in Canada and you are not living in Latin America. Like everything that, and that's one of the things that I thought growing up here in Canada. Like, damn, okay, like what happened in Venezuela, it can never happen in Canada because Canada is a developed country and we have institutions and we have rights and there are checks and balances. And no, that is BS. And if it happened anywhere in the world, it can happen here. And what can happen here? That you lose your rights and your freedoms. I'm not going to say it's going to happen in the exact same way, as happened in Venezuela, because of course it won't. No two places are the same, and it's different circumstances, it's different contexts, different eras, different methods, different ideologies, of course. But the end goal, what was that in Venezuela we lost our freedoms, we lost our rights, we lost our democracy. It can happen here in the same way, and it's happened, which is the worst part. Because and I use this symbol. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, one thing that, for you as, a Venezuelan and your family, at least you were able to defect to Canada, right? What we're seeing now, you were able to leave and, take up home in another country. What we're seeing now is not a localized event, right? It's global. It's happening on every corner of the earth. So we won't have the liberty of fleeing to another country because there's really nowhere else to defect to.
No, exactly. That's worrisome for me too, because like, damn, I already escaped one set of communists, and I came here. So when the other set of communists take power here, where am I going to flee? Like, damn. Like, so
I'm starting to think, Daniel,
chasing me around the world. Yeah.
I'm starting to think you brought it here. Maybe if we just get Daniel out, we'll be good. Maybe. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe I'm the agent. Maybe I'm the agent of communism. Yeah.
No, not the agent. No. But now you see us, we're getting close to the cliff, or are we over the cliff? Are we doing the Wile E. Coyote thing and just we don't realize we're over the cliff and we haven't looked down yet to fall? Where do you think we're at here? Do we have some time, or we're like Tesla going over the edge here with that car in California? What are we doing here, Daniel?
Damn, I mean, do you want the honest answer or do you want the politically correct one?
Well, this station isn't mainstream media, so you're gonna have to go with the honest one.
Okay,
well, hit us with
it. I am concerned about the future of Canada, if you're asking me honestly, because and by the way, I should give you all these. I wrote them down, by the way, before the program started. All the parallels that I saw between Canada and Venezuela.
Do you have it on the screen or just written down?
No, I just wrote it down, and it was the same list that. Okay, the first one is the cancel culture. That here is that if you say anything that is not politically correct, that goes against the progressive dogma of the day, you get fired, you lose your job, you get canceled on social media, you get ostracized basically, and even depending on what subject matter you touch, you can even end up in jail. For example, the bill. What was the gender identity bill? What was the number?
The C4.
Like the conversion therapy bill, like where if you miss
C4.
All that stuff.
Yeah, that's Bill C4.
If you go against what the government says, you're gonna get in trouble. This the cancel culture, the fear of speaking out, the fear of speaking your mind, of exercising your constitutional right to free speech. Back home, I saw it because if you said something that the government didn't like, government agents would show up to your door and you would get sent off to jail. Here, I'm seeing it is that you're going to get the social media mob is going to jump on top of you and you're going to get canceled and you're going to get called out and you're going to lose your job. And if you get canceled and you can't work, you can't make a living, it's pretty hard to stay alive. So it's basically the same thing. We are going to shut down freedom of expression, but using softer methods. We won't throw you in jail. We'll just cancel you and call you out on social media. The second one is that I am seeing tremendous media bias. The CBC is just a joke at this point. Like, they're not even trying to hide it. They are basically the enforcement arm of the Liberal Party. And let's face it, you guys, the media institutions aren't that far behind, because okay, the CBC is just awful, but CTV isn't that much better. And it just reminds me, like, once Chavez completely took over the institutions, how Globovisión, Televen, which these are Venezuelan channels, I'm just saying, like Venevisión, they completely go with what the government tells them to go with. It's like basically here the Trudeau government, the CBC, is spouting woke propaganda nonsense day after day. Over there, it's a communist one, but it's the same. It's the same. The media is not independent. The media doesn't act as a check on government. The media doesn't inform citizens. It is colluding with government in order to advance an agenda. That is the second one. The third one is corruption, as I probably mentioned. Corruption was a very big deal in Venezuela, and even though here it's not the same, not as depraved, not as ridiculous and just scandalous, but we've seen it recently. The We scandal, the SNC Lavalin affair, all the trips with the Aga Khan, everything we've seen recently, the all the corruption that happened during COVID. And corruption actually in these left-wing regimes, because Canada right now, the Trudeau government is a left-wing regime. I have no fear of calling it that whatsoever. Corruption actually serves a dual purpose. It is a double-edged sword. The number one is, of course, the main objective of corruption is that you get rich illegally. Of course, there is a material benefit to it. But the other part is it serves as a psychological weapon. It does, because when
Right,
there
you won't
is,
have
like
faith
we
in
were
the
seeing
system.
now with Trudeau, exactly. When you see, and we saw it under Chavez, when there is just corruption scandal after corruption scandal after corruption scandal, just one after the other, and nothing changes, people start to lose faith in the system, and people start to become demoralized. The very first, like, one or two, they say, "Oh my God, this is so bad. This is terrible. We need to do something about this. F Trudeau or whatnot." But after it keeps happening, and nothing happens. Nobody goes to jail. The government doesn't fall. There is no changes in legislation that prevents it from happening again. People become demoralized, and they just throw up their hands in the air and they say, whatever, nothing's going to change. Why even worry about that? I'll just focus on my life, because politics sucks and nothing's going to change. So it is.
Yeah,
it
let me
is
talk on that one.
A physical one, and also a psychological one. First, you get rich, and the second one, you demoralize people and you make them lose faith and trust in the system. Were you saying something? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to talk on that one. So yeah, we see that all the time. So I get comments all the time that says, "Hey, you're an independent. Don't bother running. You're not going to win. The elections are rigged." I hear that one all the time. You hear them. The courts are rigged. All the judges are no good. You're going to hear that one all the time. And then, but then when you hear people talk like that, the last thing they say is, "Well, why bother? Why should I report anything? Why should I sue? Why should I?" Because it all. Now I also want to back up a little bit to the media one. Because I just want to just play a little 2-minute clip here from a video this morning, highlighting exactly what you're talking about here in Canada about the CBC. So let me set this little video clip up. So yesterday, notice went out to the CBC that they're being sued by this lady named Carrie Sakamoto. And Carrie has been on Twitter. She's been online sharing her story of vaccine injury for quite some time now. She's reached out to the CBC to tell the story. She's reached out to a whole bunch of people to tell the story. She's been validated by the vaccine injury program in Canada as vaccine injured. So she is definitely, actually, really, truly vaccine injured. And this story's been out for about 3-4 months, but we just broke the lawsuit yesterday. I'm just going to take you through this video as we're discovering Google. We're discovering Google. We're discovering CBC scrubbing this information. So check this out.
In quotes, okay.
Yeah, so you got the full name right.
Yeah, you've got a YouTube by her. You've got a Rebel News story, Western Standard. You've got my tweet. Wait, there's no CBC.
There's no major.
There's no major, major news media at all. Now, go to cbc.ca.
Now check this part out there, Kevin. Remember, they're suing. She's suing. I don't want to type that in my computer, but there we go.
All right. Now, see the little search button up at the top? Type in Carrie Sakamoto. Go ahead. I dare you.
Oh my gosh, folks. My goodness, people. You
That's
seen
crazy.
this? This is live.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is
All right. What does that tell you?
okay, so that should be news. She filed
Yeah.
a lawsuit, $10.5 million. She's taken on the CBC, the Government of Canada, Alberta Health Services. She's got the proof, she's got the claim, she's got all the evidence. They won't even give her acknowledgement. But there is an article on their website about the lawsuit. They just don't name her. And they also don't talk about the entire lawsuit. They just talk about how CBC is being sued for misinformation. So yeah, you're seeing this real time even today.
Of course, that's concerning too, and that thing that you showed me now, where there's a massive lawsuit going around, and even like the state-owned media, you type it in and it shows nothing, like it doesn't exist. So that
Correct.
was commonplace even too in Venezuela too. Like there was this big scandal because something was happening, either a corruption scandal, there were protests against the government, or somebody had been killed, or whatever, and the state-owned media, they were basically doing a cooking show, like nothing was happening. It's the censorship, but I want to say this. These guys, as I faced in Venezuela, the Chavistas, and what we're facing now in Canada, which is not exactly like the Castro Chavista communist left. They're like the woke progressives, right?
Mm-hmm.
At their core, they may seem like different, but at their core, they are both communists. Not because they are communists that they want to like build the Soviet Union here in Canada, but is that they use the same methods that Lenin and Stalin and all these forebears of communism they used in order to bring about the revolution. Like these guys, despite of everything, they still want to bring about a revolution. They still want to bring about a state-enforced dictatorship of the weak. In that case, the proletariat in classical communism, or here, as you see in the woke, a kind of dictatorship of the minority, of these like kind of like protected and discriminated classes, like sexual minorities and racial minorities and whatever, like everything, like the successor ideology. But one of these methods that both the communists used in the 20th century and used in Venezuela, and the same method that the woke are using here in Canada, is actually, it is a method that was put forth by Lenin. And you can look it up. It is a method called penetration. I know it sounds funny, but that is literally what it is. He said the state, all the forces of the state have to be put to the service of the revolution, to the service of the cause, and therefore we need to penetrate, we need to infiltrate, we need to take over all the institutions of the state so we can put them to work in favor of our agenda. There can be no independent state separate from the vanguard, separate from the people who are bringing about this revolution. And you're seeing it now. And the media bias is just one example of that penetration. Of course, you need to take over the institution that is supposed to inform Canadians, is supposed to expose the government, is supposed to keep Canadians up to date. And what you take it over and you turn it to your favor, and it becomes basically a megaphone. It becomes an institution to propagate the ideology. You see how CBC constantly like propagates wokeness, but you see that too in the judiciary, where all the judges, those appointed by conservative or liberals alike, they are all activists. They are all proponents of this left-wing living tree constitutionalism, where the constitution changes depending on who interprets it, where there's no fixed meaning. So if I want it to mean this, it means that. It is the same thing in the education system. The universities and the schools are all taken over by these guys. And just as in Venezuela, they used it to indoctrinate people with communist ideology. Here they are doing it with these woke ideologies, progressives, and the critical race theory and gender ideology. So when you bring all that, when you realize that everything is coming under the influence of the woke, you have realized that the woke have literally taken over the institutions. And what needs to happen, and to give you the word, we need to realize that this isn't just a political fight, it is a cultural fight. And if we on the Canadian right and the right anywhere
we will have a fighting chance to take back our country and secure our liberties and our freedoms, we need to realize that we need to take back control of the institutions. Take back control of the institutions. We can't just think, okay, if we elect somebody to government, everything's going to be fine, because you can elect a government, but if you have an entire deep state underneath and surrounding that government that is completely hostile to that government's objectives, it is going to go nowhere, as we saw with Stephen Harper. So yeah.
Well, one thing that I wanted to touch base on that you did mention, you talked about cancel culture, right?
Yes.
We saw them use this, very effectively over the course of the pandemic in terms of eliminating people with dissenting views from, institutions, people that they didn't agree with, right? So they used the COVID mandate, the vaccine, and anybody who didn't refuse were ultimately removed. So they basically eliminated the 20% of the workforce, and your military, your policing, your educational systems, all these institutions, and it really allowed them to concentrate their woke views and take out anything that would oppose them, quite effectively. So you said that they did that in Venezuela. They used different methods, but that's the same thing that they did use. And one other thing too that you said is they really got control of the media, right? And you pointed out that the media was the propaganda arm of the government. Which we have with the CBC and all the legacy media here. But one thing that we also have is that they've actually used now the RCMP, and that's their enforcement arm of the government, right? So these are people that will I'm going to speculate here because we don't have we don't know what the truth is yet. People that will plant evidence, try to bring down protest, imprison people for hundreds of days, or provide people with the tools to create mass murder. And then, just to create more legislation and give the government more power. So we see that the RCMP is more of an enforcement arm. The media is a propaganda arm. And then you did touch base on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And one thing I did want to say on that is, like, Section 1 of the Charter, it's right off the bat, it says that it's worthless paper, right? So it makes it pretty clear, the first section, that it's worthless. So, as we're wrapping up and we have, 10 minutes to go, is there anything that you want to touch base on based on the points that I have brought forward, or anything else that you want to add to the conversation?
That is the thing. That is the thing. Like, believe it or not, with the Charter, is that when I saw, because when you're desperate and when you realize that your situation is terrible, it's hopeless, you desperately cling on to something that at least gives you the slightest bit of hope. And we saw that across during COVID here in Canada. We saw it during with people, they invoke the Charter to say, I have my Charter rights, you're violating. One of the things we have to realize, and you said it, the Charter is words on paper. It really is, because in 2 sections, Section 1, it says that it can be reasonably, the rights that are given to you by the Charter are not absolute, and they can be limited as can be reasonably justified in a democratic society. So what does that mean? Reasonably justified. That means that when it gets in front of a left-wing judge, if the left-wing judge likes it, it's going to be legal, and if he doesn't, it's going to be illegal. So basically, your rights are at the mercy of whatever the judge thinks it means, not what it actually means. So that's the thing. So basically, it's like they give you the illusion that you have rights, but you have none. And the other section, Section 33, the notwithstanding clause, in theory, that is supposed to be used as a kind of e-brake, as a kind of emergency option, in order to put a stop to rogue courts and say, okay, a court gave this egregious interpretation of the Charter, therefore we invoke Section 33 and we say what the law is. That's not the way it's being used. The way it's being used is that the legislatures are using it to pass through laws that are just blatantly unconstitutional and violating freedoms. We've seen it many times in Quebec, for example, with Bill 21. I am a proponent. I am a big defender of religious liberty. And I feel that if you are not allowed to practice your religion the way you want to practice, as long as it's being properly done, then you do not have religious liberty. You do not have freedom to practice your religion. So what happens when the government comes in and they pass a bill and they say, okay, no, you know what? You can't practice your religion. The court can't do anything because it's legal. So what I'm trying to say is that the charter will not save you, because the charter is not meant to save you. The charter was always, meant to trick people into thinking that their rights were being protected because they were written down. But what it really did was it transferred sovereignty from the people, from the doctrine of what we had before the charter, that was parliamentary supremacy. The parliament had the last word, and therefore the people acting through their elected representatives and elections had the last word, into whatever judges who are from the same ideological pool, the same ideological theory, think whatever they want to think. So that's the thing. That's another advice, kind of like Tide. Stop invoking the charter. The charter will not save you. The charter was never meant to save you.
You got a good point there. So what's the status of Venezuela now? Is it on recovery? Is it still in decline? Is kind of plateaued at a bad place? What's the current position?
No, it hit rock bottom, definitely. And because when you hit rock bottom, it is physically impossible to go any lower. I mean, once you hit rock bottom, you've really hit it. So of course there is because it was physically impossible for the country to get any worse than it did. There is kind of some semblance of recovery, you know, like things have stabilized a bit, but no, it is nothing. It's the same disaster. The communists are still there in power. People are still poor. Corruption is still the same. People are still fleeing the country in droves. So nothing has changed pretty much. It's plateaued in the sense that it's a stalemate right now. It's a stalemate. Nothing has happened since a few years ago, basically, when there was the last movement of a protest seeking to overthrow the government. But yeah.
Well, we're not done with this conversation, though, right, Kevin? So there's going to be a Twitter space. You want to let everybody know about that?
I was thinking about doing a Twitter space. I'm not too sure if Daniel wanted to do it. If you wanted to continue on with the conversation afterwards, we could take it to Twitter and run an hour or 2 hour spaces. It's fine by me. If he's up for it, or if he wants to do it another night, that's fine as well. So I guess I was going to give him the option to see if this is something that he wanted to do.
Yeah, we can do it. That's fine. No problem. Mm-hmm. I'm down. I mean,
I'll schedule it for
talking about this for hours.
Yeah, I'll schedule it for 8:15 or so, because I have a couple of things that I want to do before I get back in front of the microphone. So we'll continue this topic on Twitter, and you'll be able to really continue sharing your story.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, and so this is over now. We're gonna wrap this up, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, yeah. I hope I explained myself as best as I could, and you guys understood me. Believe me, trying to cram all of this into 2 hours is a bit difficult, right? But I hope that my participation was to your satisfaction, and if in a future date you guys would like to continue talking about this, I'm more than down. So thank you so much for having me, and I hope I contributed enough.
You did. The numbers are good. Facebook was good. Everybody seems to be happy. They were intrigued. We got a lot of responses. So people are paying attention because you had something to say here, Daniel. And we definitely should be paying attention to this. Daniel, you want to kind of say goodbye? And then I'll go to Kevin. He can say goodbye, and then I'll wrap up the episode.
Yes. Okay. So goodbye, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. And my main advice is, never take your rights for granted. Never think that because you're Canadian, because you're in Canada, the things can't happen here that happened anywhere else in the world. So my first thing is wake up and realize what time we're in, realize what time it is. And when you realize that the situation is pretty bleak, only then can we begin to construct a viable alternative moving forward. That's the only way. But first we have to wake up, and first we have to realize the mess that we're in.
You're absolutely right. And most of the people watching this are woken up, but you got to wake your neighbors up too, and your family as well. So spread this good information as well. And then Kevin, you want to kind of wrap up there?
It was definitely good. There are some things that I do want to touch base on, so we'll leave that to the Twitter Spaces. But other than that, I think it went pretty good. Time went pretty. 2 hours seemed to blow by yet again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that will certainly happen. So, Daniel, what we might do, and we're doing this with Dr. Mackis and a couple other guests who have really important subjects that can't fit into 2 hours, is maybe in a couple months we'll bring you back and we'll just keep doing that until we get the whole thing in. So there might be like multiple parts to get this in, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, that's fine. Like I said, I'm an open book, and I can talk about this for hours. I mean, endless source of information because I have lived through this before, and I can definitely give people more than one warning about what's coming. So, of course, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Daniel. And everybody can find you on Twitter with your handle there, and we'll make sure
Yes.
that we tweet out some more stuff about you. Thank you very much, Daniel. And Kevin, I'll be looking for that Twitter space, and I'll share that as well.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll
Bye-bye.
talk to you guys later. Take care, Daniel. Thanks.
You too.
Well, there we go. Daniel had quite the story. There's a lot more. There's a whole bunch to go on here. He talked about the economics. He talked about the control. He talked about cancel culture. He talked how the unions were being used to control the people. He even talked about how the organized crime was being used to control the people. They took some farm from a gentleman. He went and fought back, locked him up, hunger strike. He's not with us anymore. So there's quite a few things that went just horrible for them. But some of the parallels were that coup attempt didn't work, but allowed the government to crack down really, really, really hard. Was that the blueprint for Jan 6? Was that blueprint for the convoy? I don't mean the people in the convoy knew about it. I just mean the enticing the people to fight back and do something and maybe get that reason in place. In Canada, it didn't seem like we needed to be violent. They still came back harsh anyways. But I wonder if we came back harsh or a lot more violent, if it would have been even worse. I don't know if we're off the cliff, if we're doing the Wile E. Coyote thing and our little feet are just dangling there until we look down, or what we're doing here. But Daniel seems to think we're already in a lot of trouble. And what Kevin and Daniel also highlighted was there's nowhere else to go. Okay, so when Daniel was running into this a while ago, there was at least Canada to go. It's still pretty free. It's still doing pretty good. G7, etc. But now, where do we go? Where do we go? It seems like each country is going through its little templated revolution, designed revolution, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't look good. It doesn't end up good. We didn't get into the healthcare stuff. We got a little bit of the education stuff, but yeah, we're seeing some of these things line up, and it's not making me happy. Kevin did a great job on showing how the price of gold related to their value, their currency, how it spiked, because that's hyperinflation. That's exactly how you can demonstrate that. What does an ounce of gold cost in your currency? So that's what Kevin showed us, because gold is a pretty, flat price around the world. So it's your currency being related to it. So you see that spike, I guess it goes this way. You see that spike and boom, that's hyperinflation. And that's what takes the country down for sure. You can be doing great, but all of a sudden things cost more and more and more. He told a story about how even the coffee could cost more later in the day, the same cup of coffee. So, folks, do pay attention. I know a lot of you are paying attention. The kind of effort that we're doing here is to prepare you and get you armed with some of the information and some of the red flags that we saw out of Venezuela and how that happened. And talk to people. Show them this video with Daniel. He's a very well-spoken young man. So he's here to be the canary in Canada. And I'm glad he is. Because we need people like this as well to come out and let us know, hey, I'm from somewhere else abroad. You might want to know what happened there because it's happening here too. They didn't maybe have 15-minute cities. They maybe didn't have digital currency. Well, we kind of get that later. Digital ID, some of this other stuff. That just means it's modern. We're just modernizing the destruction of a country. So I'm paying attention to Daniel. We'll have him back. Check out the Twitter space. I'll try and be there. I'm still catching up from my marathon yesterday. There was a lot going on yesterday. And I'm still catching up on Twitter. You guys have been amazing. Lots of the stuff is blowing up. So I do appreciate that. And I do see a lot of people showed up from Facebook today. So thank you all very much for sharing on Facebook. Give us some likes. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a heart. And if you were sad, give us a sad as well. We had one person, Iris. You felt sad. Give us a subscribe. Go ahead and go on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, wherever you are, whatever platform you are. Give a follow, a subscribe, whatever's going on there. And make sure that if you like it, you clip it. We had a great clip today from the Chief Nerd. He clipped a good portion of a video yesterday, which was Carrie speaking about her injury, and that went viral. So we're doing very well with that. Come join our Discord. You can help us get things done. We're working on some projects. If you have tips and information or dumps, I'm getting a lot of people sending me little requests saying, hey, I got a bunch of information. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to point them to Discord so they can upload and share there, and we can take a look at it and work on that. Remember, we're live streaming on Rumble, Odyssey, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and you don't see it yet, but there will be a little Getter icon right there. So also on Getter as well. So 8 platforms you can find us on. So thank you all very much. I'm going to see if we have a couple of comments here. So Miss Kitty says, great show, Jason. Thank you for continuing the story. Yeah, because this is not over, right? It's still an ongoing problem. So what will be great is Daniel can kind of recap us every couple months, every 3 months or so, as we can fit him in, and let us know how it's going. Continue the story and give us a bit of an update. I'm hoping things will turn around, but the indicators aren't there, and Kevin's looked. And then Miss Kitty also says, I especially like that you follow up on all the news. Thank you very much, Miss Kitty. I hope you have subscribed and you're going to be getting a lot more of this. And every once in a while, we'll have a special episode that we didn't plan on because news breaks. So we'll bring it out to you, Miss Kitty, when we have it. And thank you very much, Tammy, for showing up. Have a wonderful night as well. And I also saw quite a few people. Charlie was in here. Thank you, Charlie, for showing up again. Brenda, you keep coming back. We love you. And Padge, you're clicking the buttons and making things look great. Thank you so much. And then Peter, you're one of the biggest supporters we have. You're always here. You're on Twitter and you're helping out as well. And if I missed anybody, I'm sorry. Oh, hello, Edward. Thank you deeply for this powerful information that everyone should know about the corruption. You men are warriors that stand with them in the light of goodness with God in your heart. For freedom, we all matter. I think we all matter. And Edward, you're not wrong. This is a lot of work. Kevin's doing a great job. Daniel's doing a great job. If you stick around for our morning show, Donald's doing a great job. Granny's doing a great job. There's just a long list of Canadians working hard for everybody here. So I really appreciate the pleasure to be able to host you. And absolutely, come back tomorrow. It will be 6 a.m. Mountain, 8 a.m. Eastern, and we'll be continuing with the Coots 4. Tomorrow, we're going over some videos and some information that Granny was talking about at the end of today's episode, and we may have another seasoned police officer joining us. We're not sure yet, but if we don't, it's going to be Donald, Granny, and I. We'll be going over some videos and some pretty important information. But in either case, make sure you come back. The Coots men are important. We don't want to forget them. So thank you all very much. You know how I feel about you. I love you all. And God bless.